Welcome to this video in our Omega Starter Pack where we're going to deal with finances. There are very few things in your life that will throw you into a bad place as quickly as facing some of the outcomes that you're facing because of old behaviors and debts and just an overwhelming sense of how do I even face the future? Finances can be like that, and I actually would start you with a couple of questions. Number one, which is how deep is the hole? And number two, which is how long do you have to get out of the hole? Unfortunately, most people are looking at this thing and they're seeing the deep hole, they're seeing the overwhelming hole, but they're not willing to put it on a calendar. They're not willing to stretch it out. What I have found, we've literally seen people pay off $20,000, $50,000. We've seen some phenomenal numbers of payoffs, but those people had to stretch it out for a longer period of time. So the first piece of advice we want to start with is slow the process down, take a deep breath. When you start looking at this from a different perspective, you're going to find that it's going to go much better. The other thing that I want to say just right up front, if you do it the right way, if you get heart change, if you get your feet under you, you begin to get the right kinds of classes on board, the right kinds of habits on board first, then you're going to find that this thing will be compounding in a positive way later. The secret to wealth on a huge level is compounding interest. If you start very young and you put away a very small amount of money when you're extremely young and you just sock it away and it's getting 5% interest a year or whatever number, by the time you would be ready to retire, it's a huge number, a phenomenal number. The same principle works here. Slow the process down, get the pieces in place, do it the right way, and all of a sudden this thing in a compounding way has helped many of our people pay off some phenomenal numbers, put that stress away, and get into a better place. We're going to be talking about principles of what we want you to do as the program goes on, so that hopefully you can take a bit of a deep breath and realize, oh, I don't have to fix this today. We can start working today with what needs to happen, and step by step, we'll go through this process. Let me give you the big overview. The big overview is the front part of the program. You really need to focus on you and the program. Then at some point, you'll be ready to get a job that's not a job of your dreams. Get that job, be faithful, develop a resume, and then somewhere around the 6-month mark, 7, 8, 9-month mark, then you'll be able to get a better job. And when you get a better job, that's when things start kicking in. And then if you kick on out there farther beyond the year mark, you may not just have a better job, but then you're actually ready to work some overtime to where you can really compound the process. But what does almost everybody do? They want to work overtime right away, pay off as much money as they can, and they stay in exactly the same place, the same hole, because they're not getting better, and it all blows up. They end up out of the program, using all over again, and then they come back to us. How about if we develop a little better plan? Matthew, you're our expert on this area, so talk us through some basics of what you talk about just to help people get their mind around things so that they can maybe see the big picture, begin to plan for that.
So I definitely come at this from I've been there on the bad decisions, making the choices that got me into a giant hole. And so when you ask how big was the hole, I had a huge hole, and it took 15 years to get out of. And it was because I didn't learn the principles that we try to promote here. So my job here with most of the people in the program is going to be to meet with you and talk about the scary things of how much money do you owe places. And what I found out of the hundreds of people I've done this with, most people don't even know who they owe money to. They know that they owe something to somebody, but they don't know how much. So a part of that, when you first get here and you come in to talk with me, is actually being willing to confront what you owe to who, and we can sit down together and we can work that out. And then, like you just said, being slow about it is the way that we've seen people pay this stuff off. I've had people come in that have sat down with me, and after we've listed everything out, they make in excess of, they had 5 to 6 times what they could make in a year in bills that they owed. And the ones that actually followed the principles that we lay out, they've actually been able to pay those things off. And it takes a long time and it takes sacrifice. And the effort is what we want to see, because if you're willing to put that effort in, that's where the reward can come through. And so that's just where we start at.
And the deeper the hole, the longer it's going to take. And if I spread it out, if I get it down to bite-sized pieces and I do it the right way, it does become doable. And again, we've seen some incredible outcomes by doing that. Heather, I know you came in with a truckload, and just talk to us a little bit from a testimony standpoint. What's happened in that area for you?
Well, for so much of my life, this was an area of like an undercurrent of anxiety that I didn't even realize was driving a lot of restlessness. And I thought that it was out of sight, out of mind, really, and just felt so overwhelmed that I didn't even know how to begin to approach it. So I came in, yes, with back tax debt, student loan debt, but even more pressing for me was the fact that I had restitution and fines to pay for legal matters. So the big thing for me, I think, in the beginning was just being willing, like Matthew was talking about, to just sit down with somebody and get honest about, hey, I'm overwhelmed and I've got all this that worries me and that I don't even want to think about, but I have to think about
honesty, because honesty is the number one thing that I've seen since doing this job that is an indicator if they're going to be successful or not, is the honesty portion. So that was an excellent. I didn't mean to interrupt there. I just thought that was great.
Yeah, I do think it's important. It's humbling, I for most of my life had a lot of pride around I make the money, so I should get to choose where it goes, and it's nobody else's business what I do with the money. But I saw how that had caused problems in my marriage. It had caused problems in my own personal finances, and I couldn't run from it anymore. And got to a place where I was willing to just say, hey, you've got 6 kids and your wife doesn't work. Maybe you know more about how to manage money than I do,
Well, something that's interesting is back to the how big is your hole. You also have to realize that you're in a hole that you can't get out of it by yourself. And you have to be willing to be honest and ask for help, because there's always help right there available. But are you actually willing to look up and ask for it? And so part of what we do when we sit down, and you'll be going through this too, is we're going to list out all these things that you have, right? But then we're going to work with you on how we can come up with a plan to get these things taken care of, right? And I know that you've come up with some items that we look at to see of what's most important and what the priorities are. Did you want to start going into that?
That was my plan, especially after Heather spoke and she kind of pretty much laid that out. You've got these things. You've got student debt. You've got some of these other pieces. Some of those can kind of be put on hold for a while. And some of them, if you put them on hold, payday loans, all of those sorts of pieces. I have people who literally, they've owed thousands. They borrow 100 and they owe 1,000, and so it's like, please do not do that. And if you have those, we kind of have to jump those up. And frankly, we set up, if you're going to stretch this out over a period of time, you have to set up priorities. And just because it resonates and it makes the point, the number one priority we list is stay out of jail. And hopefully that will help you kind of breathe. If you have a need, you have a fine to pay. And if that fine doesn't get paid, you go back to jail. Well, you can't do the program if you're back in jail. You can't make more money if you're back in jail, et cetera. And again, that's not always the priority. Occasionally, there's something that the smartest thing they can do, go get your 30 days done, then we'll work with it. So that's not always the priority. But the majority of the time, if it comes down to money, hey, we'll work with you. We'll help you have that priority to stay out of jail. And this is a basic principle of budgeting. You start with, what part of this apple can I bite now? And what part can I wait till later? Otherwise, it's all there immediately, right now, and you're feeling all of that pressure. And that's one of the things that will help you do is take a look at that. The second thing that we have, which we somewhat take away from your need, but which is keep a roof over your head and meet food and health needs. Again, we have many provisions in that area. If you're doing what you're supposed to be doing, if you're communicating with Matthew, if you're walking through the finance process, if you're budgeting, if you're doing what you're supposed to be doing, you're not going to be removed because, wow, you didn't follow through with A, B, or C. It'll be because you didn't communicate with Matthew. You didn't do what you said you would do. Okay, now we have some problems.
I always tell everybody that's new when they come in, we're never going to remove you because you can't pay. We will remove someone if they won't pay, because there's a huge difference between, look, I just don't have the money, and nope, it's my money. And that all goes back to the honesty, being willing to confront it and look at it. So I just want you to know, when you hear that we need to know about your finances, that's a sensitive area for most people. But it's not so that we can dangle it over you or punish you with it. It's so that when we see you being transparent, we can stand there and help you and fight with you by saying, look, if you literally can't pay us, we're not going to remove you. You're going to have a safe place to stay at, and you're still going to be able to have access to all the good that the program can bring. And so I think that's something that is very different about the Omega Project than basically every other place. Because all these other places, they might advertise free, but then you have to go put in 50 hours of work a week and follow this long list. We just ask for you to be honest and to communicate with us.
And to follow a plan. Obviously, with Jeremy, they also have an accountability plan. You need to be in classes. You need to be doing what you're supposed to be doing. And so there's an entire mix. We're not here for you to come in and freeload and sleep for 3 weeks and then wake up and start making demands. But if you're doing what you're supposed to be doing, our goal is for you to get better. And that, if that means that we need to help you in some different areas, we'll help you in those areas. But in order to earn that, and again, don't necessarily like that language, but in order to earn that freedom, you've got to be communicating. You've got to budget. You need to follow through. You need to do the volunteer hours, be coming to class. If you're not willing to do those things, that's when you get into the area of potentially being removed. Now, let me continue on down the list. Number 3 that I have in terms of priorities, and this is what we're showing you. We're showing you that a budget sets priorities. Number 1, I want to stay out of jail. Number 2, I might want to have something to eat today. Number 3, I have down minimize stress points that might increase the chance of using. As a program, and frankly, I've fought with this. Some programs, come in and say, know this, know this, know this, and they include smoking as a part of that. And as a program, we've made the choice that it's pretty difficult to quit drugs and smoking at the exact same time. So for many people, this is one that I don't like. Okay? And I'll tell you up front, I don't like it. We make you go outside to smoke. We make it inconvenient. Okay? We'll talk to you about different things like that. But if something raises to a high stress point that's likely to send you over the edge of using, we want to look at that and we want to talk about it. We may not just immediately say, sure, you go and do. But smoking is one of those issues. Sometimes it's a car. I'm about to lose my car, and if I just make this payment or if I just make this insurance payment, I'm able to maintain my car. There are times when stress points like that rise to the level to where we may not be real happy about it, but we're looking at you, we're looking at what's going to help you be successful, and so we're listening, we're evaluating. Now, it might be that something that's very foolish on your part that we have to work with and try to squeeze that thing, but stress points, we're creating a budget. Number 1, I want to stay out of jail. Number 2, I want to have a roof and food. Number 3, I want to, as much as possible, minimize those stress points because why? I want to get healthy. I want to not use. I want to stay in a positive zone. And then the 4th thing that I put down is to, from at that point, begin to consider wants and needs on a step-by-step basis.
That's the hard part.
That's the hard one.
Because we have such a skewed view of what a need is. And a huge problem and area that I've noticed over the years of doing this now is that so many wants people think are needs. And so we actually will talk about things like that. And it can be tough to hear what you think is a need actually isn't a need. But if people will stick with that and be willing to just talk and to just listen.
An easy one there for me, easy for me, I'm not the one doing it, is cell phones. Immediately people are like, I have to have this phone, etc. Well, no, you have access to a phone. And you start down through the different things, and so that's an expense that may be a want and not necessarily a need. And there's all kinds of different things there. If you don't have it, you don't have it. And so then you have to step back and begin to work through that process and build those priorities.
And that's why it goes back to when we're talking to folks, if you come in and you don't have a job, we're going to sit down, like the priority list that you talked about, but we don't count everything as priority. So we kind of almost force your hand a little bit in what is a priority. And people do always say, well, I need to pay my cell phone payment. Well, how much is your cell phone? Well, it's $110. Okay, why do you need a cell phone?
Especially a cell phone with a $110 payment.
Yep. So then, maybe they do actually need a cell phone. Maybe it's related to work or something. There's a lot cheaper cell phone plans out there that we can help get people onto. But when we realize necessity is food, shelter, clothes, our prescription medication, and staying sober, that really radically changes what your actual monthly budget is. And then it frees up a lot of money to pay towards other things. And once you get that first fine knocked out, or you get off corrections because you got it paid off ahead, you can immediately go, oh, wait, this feels good getting to pay something off. And then you want to start it in on the next one. And that's the goal. The people that have followed just the simple things that we have pointed out to them, they're able to leave here at 18 months, or some a little before, some a little after, but have enough money for a down payment, a security deposit. Most have had a vehicle going. And that doesn't sound awesome because you're like, well, I need a lot of money. I need this. But think about where you're at right now. You're here watching this. You haven't been in the program very long. Do you have the car? Do you have the regular job, the money to do all these things? So it is a huge improvement. And that's why this stuff excites me, because you can see somebody go from, wow, I have really just torched my past, to, okay, we can get through this and see where we're going.
A pet peeve of mine, actually, is the convenience store and the energy drinks, or forget energy drinks, just soft drinks and all of the different things. You actually were sharing about someone you challenged in that area and the amount of dollars they spent in just a few days.
Yeah, it was unbelievable. This gentleman was trying to do what was right. He was trying to walk through his budgets, and he didn't know where his money was going. And we narrowed it down to he was going to the Quick Shop multiple times a day. And after just 3 days of him tracking his spending there, he had spent $70 to $90 in 3 days with nothing to show for it. And so when we actually figured it out, he was spending in excess of $500 a month just on that. And he said, oh, I'm going to Walmart now. And he was able to get the same types of things and reduce the spending to under $100.
Now I'll mess with people. Take it the next step, and then instead of drinking high-priced soda, drink lower-priced soda, or stop it altogether and get some kind of a powdered drink or whatever.
Well, it just depends on how important is it to you to get your fines paid off, to get off of corrections, to get that vehicle. Do you need your Mountain Dew today? Or is it okay to go with water and homemade coffee for a while? And it does add up. You'll hear on the news people saying, oh, well, you can't save for a house by not getting your avocado toast. Yes, you can. When you add up how much money you're spending on these little things, it's $1.50 here, $1.50 there. It adds up to thousands of dollars a year. That's a vehicle. So it does matter, every single little purchase.
Food is also, we're talking about food, but there are frugal ways to make sure that you're eating well too. I have learned, instead of going out to eat, to meal prep for the week. And so I get food enough for myself to make a meal for the whole week, and that's what I eat for the week. Now that may seem like, oh my gosh, you eat the same thing for 4 or 5 days. But when I look at how much money I save, I'm blessed because currently I get to have food stamps. And so I'm able to pay for all of my food just on what my food stamps cover. And then the rest of my food can go to paying off my fines, my restitution, my bills, that type of thing. And so just getting smart about that too, because, used to a value meal at McDonald's was $3.99. And now you can't get out of McDonald's spending under $10.
In addition, what you're talking about, and something that I would encourage each of you to think about, is just the whole dietary piece. I don't think we're going to do a separate one on that, but that's huge. Learning to build a plan for the week for your food and have people talk with you and work through that. You can save huge amounts. And so food is a major area, both towards health and towards finances, and it's something for you to think about. Another key point that I want to talk about, we're in a superheated job market right now. And because of that, here's what we find. Almost everybody who gets hired onto a job, they want them full-time, and then they want them working overtime. And invariably what happens, as soon as someone gets a whiff of a job, they're done with the program. And change isn't change until it's change. You don't get heart change. We talked about this in an earlier video, until it becomes a new normal, until it becomes a new habit. And so invariably, really, one of the number one enemies that we have right now to success in the program are people who get jobs and then they're being pressed to do overtime. And then after they're doing overtime, they basically aren't in the program anymore. Plus, they've got money in their pocket comparatively. That's an absolute recipe for disaster. So what we strongly recommend is that you volunteer during that first period of time, or you work for Workforce on a part-time basis where we help guarantee that you're able to attend classes. Now, that doesn't look good. It's like, that's it? That's all the money that I'm going to make? Well, first of all, let me kind of go back to what Matthew was saying. A lot of times in programs, when you work for that, they basically absorb your paycheck. They keep your paycheck. We don't do that. We actually pay you and then ask you to sit down with Matthew and budget. And so it's like a real-time job. You're getting paid, you're budgeting, you're getting skills, but here's the key. You're able to work around classes and be in class. And in the current market, so many of our people they're getting snatched up in a way, and it gives them a false sense of security, a false sense of success. And anywhere from 1 month, 3 months, 4 months in, we're seeing those people crash. So we really want to talk to you about that. This thing that looks like it's a panacea, it looks like a quick fix. Please don't fall for that. Step back, put your recovery first, and let's walk through this in the pattern that I talked about. Your first job is program. It's to begin to get the concepts down, begin to drink in the stuff. Go back through, get your anchor point in place, get your normals in place, get these first videos that we've created, get those in place first. Then we start through this process of working towards a better financial future, one step at a time.
I think it's important to maybe address that whole, you said at the beginning of the video about it's not going to be your dream job. It also probably won't be your dream rate or even what you think you're supposed to be making or what you're used to making. But one of the things that became apparent to me here is that I also don't have the bills that are all on me, where I'm having to cover $800 a month rent, $200 a month utilities, plus a phone, plus all these things. A lot of those shared expenses, the way that we operate here helps me to not need to make $20 an hour. I can afford to take a part-time job making a lower rate. And on balance, it all works out where I even have money left over to start paying off these extra things. So I'm not just living hand to mouth anymore. So, just a leveling of the pride where, I might say, well, I could make $14 an hour working at Subway or McDonald's or whatever, to understand that I don't need $14 an hour in the beginning of working here. I can start from a lower rate and put first things first.
But if I take that 14-hour job and I'm hanging out with people who are potentially using, all of a sudden I'm using, and now how far ahead am I? And that happens a lot. And so it's so important. I can't say it enough times. Don't put the finances first, put your recovery first, learn the budgeting principles, take it one step at a time, learn to do the different things. Another thing, which again, people hate and they're aggravated by, but rolled cigarettes versus, the pre-bought cigarettes, whatever. There's savings points here, there, and everywhere. And you start putting those pieces in place, and all of a sudden, I'm able to do some of the things that I want to do. It's not the way that I want, not as fast as I want, but that's going to be the number one issue, time. If you're willing to give it time and you're willing to use these principles that we will teach you, it will be huge in terms of you turning your entire financial picture around. I'm going to have you say one quick thing, too. The IRS piece that you mentioned, you do what you're supposed to do, you surrender to God. You got some incredible news on that, didn't you?
Amazing news that I was terrified to file my taxes because I knew I was behind. And it's like, I'd been able to stay one step ahead because, I come from that lifestyle. And when I filed my taxes last year, I was like, oh, now they're going to have my address. And I mean, there's a part of me that was just waiting for them to knock on the door. But I got a notice. In my mind, I owed $10,000 more than what the notice said that I did. And it was just this complete weight off. And I knew it was God. I didn't pay off $10,000 in taxes since I've been here, but because I did the right thing, because I was honest, I went ahead and filed my taxes. I'm going to let them find me. I'm going to, I'm going to let them know where I am. I'm not going to keep running from these problems. Turns out the problem wasn't nearly as big as I thought it was. And that's a huge blessing and miracle, really. So
when you do it God's way, He helps.
He does.
You were ready to jump in?
Yeah, going back to what you had mentioned about the job market and these, we're having a lot of people able to get into good paying jobs very quickly and it kind of taking them out. Something that's unique that I didn't know I would see in the years that I've been doing this is the amount of people that come into this program and get large sums of money, whether it's a settlement or it's some huge tax thing that all of a sudden they're sitting with 20 grand or an inheritance come through. And something that I've just noticed is that it's always taken the person out. It has set them back. And I have seen people come through that have had hundreds of thousands of dollars given to them that a year later were homeless with less than they had when they were here because they didn't want to follow some of these principles that we're laying out. I'm not saying you're going to get a large check of money, but if you do, it's the same thing as getting an excellent job. Reach out to the people that are around you and trust that we're going to try to point you in the right direction. And we don't want your money. That's not why you're here, and that's not what we're here for. And I think that's something that's really hard for people to understand. We don't want your money. We want you to follow through with what's good for you. And that does involve paying your fair share, but we work with you and we're individualized with everybody. So your fair share is different than mine, is different than yours. And I think that's one reason that our program can be very successful.
And this finances piece is within the area of accountability. Be accountable for your time. I mean, that one is huge. Be accountable for your relationships. That one is huge. You talk about something that will take you out and take you out quickly. Be accountable for your finances. That one will take you out. And a huge step, a lot of times, let's go back to relationship. No, you're not going to tell me who I'm going to date. You're not, et cetera. Well, let's go to if. What happens is you start dating inside of a recovery program, in a rehab, in a detox facility. Guess where you're going to go? And it's like 0% chance. So what you have to do, you have to take these areas, turn them over to accountability where you're listening to something you don't want to hear outside of your normal zone. And that's true of finances. And obviously, Matthew does a great job. He helps set all of that up. Jeremy also will come alongside, help you, work with you in terms of fleshing that out, making it work. So we've got people there. You can also turn to other people. There are many other kinds of people maybe in the program that can come alongside and help you. And this accountability piece is important. Most people struggle financially because they absolutely refuse any input, and they don't get what they need, and so then they stay in a hole.
And we don't pretend that we can force anyone either here. It's your money. I tell people all the time, you're an adult. You are making the money. It's your ultimate right to do as you please with it. But if you want to see something different than being broke 3 days after you got a paycheck, maybe try this out instead. Again, the ones that are willing to, I said at the beginning, they found that it has drastically altered their life. It doesn't make them rich, but it gets them on the way to getting out of the hole and being able to walk on their own 2 feet. Makes it a little bit better.
Many of our people have commented that what they've done with you has changed their life, and it puts them in a different place. I'm going to make one other comment. Again, we don't force this. We strongly suggest it. But those who tithe, those who give a tenth of their what they take into God, we believe that God says very clearly in Malachi and other places that He will stretch, He will bless, He will work that out. And so that's a part of what we talk about. It's not forced. We do very few things around here that are forced. I mean, there comes a point, a line, and to me, defiance is the big issue. Go back to what Matthew said. It's not if those who can't pay that have an issue, it's those who won't pay. And so when the money is there and everything is reasonable and you don't pay, we will remove you. We're certainly not going to force in this area. We will suggest. We believe that if you begin to honor God with your finances, what you will find is God will honor you and it will be multiplied back to you. So these are basic principles that if you'll follow these principles, you will find it will make a difference in your life and in your finances. And when you're able to minimize that stress, it's almost impossible to eliminate it, unless you're just wealthy. But when you can minimize that stress, get it into a manageable level, you've got a vision, you've got a plan, it just changes everything in terms of your ability to take a deep breath and really focus on what you need to focus on right now, which is your recovery. Any comments that you guys want to make?
I've got just one. You just mentioned that unless you're really wealthy, maybe there's not that stress aspect. I can think of several people that have come through that have been very wealthy, beyond anything I could, think of. And they were some of the most stressed people when it came to money, because the Bible lays it out pretty clearly. If we can't manage a little, we certainly can't manage a lot. When you talk about tithing, we think it's hard because, I just made $100. How am I going to give $10 to God? Well, think about that if you made $1 million. You'd have to give $100,000. So how does that actually work? Being accountable in the small steps really does pay off later on. So don't think money can solve your problems, because it goes so much deeper than that.
And I do second that. Many people who are wealthy are concerned about losing it or who knows what, and they actually are more stressed than the people who actually have nothing. So that actually is true. Heather, any?
Being a year in, I've been in treatment before, and I've been in 12-step programs before. This for me was one of the biggest differences in our program in the Omega Project. And Pastor, one of your one-liners is understanding follows obedience. So I was willing to say, okay, I'll try something different because couldn't make a bigger mess of my life than I already have. But now that I'm more than a year into the program and I'm looking toward my future of going and being with my family and being reunited and starting a new life, I feel so much more equipped to do that just from having a budget. I've lived my whole life with, I get my paycheck and I'm already behind. So now I have to catch up, and now there's nothing for me to go forward. And just being in the habit of doing this. I love that we have tithing first. It was something I was never willing to do. I love that it's the first line item on the budget, because now that has become a priority for me. And I don't miss the money, and I feel better. I mean, maybe that's why the IRS debt got wiped out. I know God says, test me in this. Just see if I'll do this, maybe it is. But I do know that for me, it makes me feel more in integrity. I feel like I'm honoring God with what he gives me, and that makes me feel more confident in approaching him. But it makes me feel more confident too in rejoining my family. I'm not going to have to go back to my parents' house like I have in the past when I got out of jail or I got out of treatment and be like, okay, mom and dad, I need to just live here for a little while I can save up some money. And I'm not going to have to do that. I'm going to be ahead of the curve, and I won't have to be a burden on them. What an amazing amend to make to my family so that they can really see a change in me and relieve some of that pressure off their shoulders too.
Budgeting is really just a financial plan. We need to plan for everything. If you think about what we talked about, developing new normals, that's taking your time, that's developing good habits. You need to develop good habits in this area. And a little bit can make a huge difference. You do the payday loan, you'll find out how a little bit will absolutely destroy you. You get into credit card debt, you'll find out how a little bit will absolutely destroy you. You begin to have fines compounding and all of the different things, you'll find out how a little bit can absolutely destroy you. He who is faithful with a little will be faithful with much. Right now is the time. Get started with this. If you'll walk this out a little bit at a time, one day at a time, you'll see an amazing transformation. This financial piece is a very important part of your recovery. When it's in place, many of the other pieces will fall in place. We encourage you, connect, do your best to have a good attitude about it. Begin to develop some expectation of positive outcomes. If you'll walk it through that way, you will be blessed, and you will find that this is a very important part of your recovery. Jump in, have a good attitude, walk it through, and expect God's favor.